Let us build a house where love can dwell and all can safely live. A place where saints and children tell how hearts learn to forgive. Built of hopes and dreams and visions, rock of faith and vault of grace. Here the love of Christ shall end division.
A reading from the first book of Kings. The Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night. God said, "Ask something of me, and I will give it to you." Solomon answered, "O Lord my God, you have made me your servant, king to succeed my father David. But I am a mere youth, and knowing at all not how to act. I serve you in the midst of the people whom you have chosen, a people so vast that it cannot be numbered or counted, a people so vast that we will never know. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding heart, to judge your people and to distinguish right from wrong. For who is able to govern this vast people of yours?" The Lord was pleased with Solomon. He made this request. So God said to him, "Because you have asked for this, not for a long life for yourself, nor for riches, nor for the life of your enemies, but for understanding, so that you may know what is right, I do as you're requested. I give you a heart so wise and understanding that there has never been anyone like you up to now. And after you, there will come no one to equal you." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Response: Lord, I love your commands.
Lord, I love your commands.
I have said, O Lord, that my part is to keep your words. The law of your mouth is to me more precious than thousands of gold and silver pieces.
Lord, I love your commands.
Let your kindness comfort me, according to your promise to your servants. Let your compassion come to me, that I may live, for your law is my delight.
Lord, I love your commands.
For I love your commands, more than gold, however fine. For in all your precepts I go forward, every false way I hate.
Lord, I love your commands.
Wonderful are your decrees, therefore I observe them. The revelation of your words sheds light, giving understanding to the simple.
Lord, I love your commands.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, we know that all things work for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that he might be the firstborn among my brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. And those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Lord, to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure buried in a field, which a person finds and hides again. And out of joy goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. When he finds a pearl of great price, he goes and sells all that he has and buys it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea, which collects fish of every kind. When it is full, they haul it ashore and sit down to put what is good into buckets. What is bad, they throw away. Thus it will be at the end of the age. The angels will go out and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Do you understand all these things? They answered, yes. And he replied, then every scribe who has been instructed in the kingdom of heaven is like the head of a household, who brings from his storeroom both the new and the old. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
The readings that we hear are not only for the Sunday, the 17th week of the year, but they're for all during the pandemic season that we have, the old and the new. And we go back at the beginning and find that old was a sense of wisdom too. For Solomon was asked, what did he want from the Lord? And he didn't say a lot of money or power or even vengeance on his enemy. Rather, he said that he wanted wisdom. And God gave him that because he was pleased with that answer. Wisdom. We know from Psalm 90 that wisdom is knowing the shortness of our life. Wisdom, well, it's very important today. When we suffer like we do in the world around us, we look to the wisdom of Solomon, who wasn't a perfect person, by the way, and that comes out in Scripture later on. But he did try to be a wise person many times, and so ought we. We should be people who are wise to what's going on. The old, in this sense, has been the number of pandemics and plagues that have really suffered, that people have suffered through for centuries, since really the beginning. It's a natural reoccurrence that will be part of ours on various occasions. The last major one was in 1819, and at that time, 50 million out of a population 1/3 of what it is today is said to have passed away. We are not near anything like that, and yet we see the seriousness of what the situation is today and hope that through human effort, which is new and new technology, may be able to answer and give us in some way a reprieve for the lives of so many and those who could possibly suffer from this. So as we face this, we then look at what Jesus is telling us in the parables. These parables are always coming to a limited point. I say limited because what we tend to do is wonder, well, what happened after the parable? Did the Good Samaritan, was he able to meet the fellow again? Or did the fellow live and move on? What about the prodigal son? Did that brother really forgive him? And did they live happily ever after? Because we're like kids who hear something and think of it often as a fairy tale. And in doing so, we think that everything will turn out okay. But it won't. It's part of life. Life has its ups and downs, and even those that were characters in those parables, they had their ups and downs too. So a parable is trying to emphasize a certain point, and today we have those points, as we just heard in the gospel. They were talking about a great pearl, wonderful one, so great that a person using all the focus that they had and all the resources they had to give up everything else, and that would take some time to do, wouldn't it? And purchase that pearl. And that pearl is Christ himself. So our real direction that we have, our designation, is for those things that are very important and precious. And then when we hear about a treasure in the field, well, you know, it could be an actual material thing, or it could be simply the location of that field was for somebody with a certain motive. It would be an important thing to have. So we don't know what it was, and it could have been an imperfect motivation to go and hide a treasure. Who owned the treasure, we'd say. But those things are not directly related to the parable, and we should remember again, the limited parable is to tell us how we are to focus our attention on the important things of life. And this applies all back through all the parables of Christ. Teaching method, but not to be used in the wrong sense. And so often people tend, like kids, to look for the happy ever after. And so parables are important teachings that Christ gave to us all, and he did it with a sense of authority that they must have been really grasped in their own way and were able to understand exactly what he was talking about. He spoke in their language, he spoke clearly, he kept it short. Everything seemed to have been great in the way in which he taught through parables. And so we look again then at the parable that we have today, and we think in our own terms, what about those last words that Jesus is talking about? Is that the one who is the writer or the scriptor, would he be the one that would bring the new out of the old, the treasure that we have, the treasure of wisdom, the treasure of what is and who Christ is? Could he bring that out in some fashion, in a new way, so that what was old can now become something that's practical for us today? We ask that question because the pandemic is something new, and we have to live with the conditions that we have. And so when we think about that, we look at what Christ did and said, and just wonder again, are we able to take the old, which is our faith, and make it something new for the present day so that we can have a future? The present moment is very important. In a parable we would say, well, the reward was that ultimately the person would be received into heaven and have something personal that would be a reward for doing the proper thing. And we could say that that could also apply as a motive, which wasn't a perfect motive, but it would apply to others that we know. And so we extend that future that would be rewarded to other people too. Or we could go still further and say, in order for us to reach that reward, it's important for us today to work and share with each other. The sharing with others now is what is so important, and to be Christ-like. That is what Christ was. He didn't talk just about future events. He talked most of the time about who these people were and how they were to be better, how they that were hungry or that were sick could be able to have wellness or satisfaction. And so when we look at it that way, then we see that Jesus is talking about the present moment, and it has to be something new in itself. You use examples of the saints. Saint Papetto and Felicity, she was the first Christian woman writer in the church, most likely, died in 203 AD, and she was not yet baptized even. She was a catechumen trying to prepare for being a Christian, and her husband and her slave, who was Felicity, who was with child. And so as we think about all of these events happening in someone's life, and her father said to her, all you have to do is pick up a pinch of incense and put it over on the brazier, saying that the Caesar is the God and King of us all. All she had to do. But she knew she wanted to be a Christian, and that Christ was the great pearl, not this man who lived in the world at that time. And so she refused to do it. And for that, they put her into a coliseum where the heifers were used against the women and the lions against the men. And they actually killed her eventually. And as we look into that, she had written while her in prison her thoughts and visions and things like this. And I know St. Augustine reread it many times, and I try to once a year reread the story of her life, because I think it is so important for us all. The way her father pressed her to be a pagan and remain one, and she would not accept. Then we look at the present day. Just a few years ago, 23 young Coptic Christians, men, workers in Libya, were told either you become Muslim, and you know, to become a Muslim, all you have to do is say one sentence. That's it. No baptism, no nothing. Just it. They refused to do it. One by one, they were killed. And think of them with their families, young families, needing the kids back in Egypt under semi-type of persecution, you might say, or at least under stressful conditions, and yet they did not betray their faith. They are the new, and it's happening today in China and other places. And in some ways, it's also happening in the pandemic situation in which we're in. Some people are willing to say, I will share with others. I expect the Lord to be with us. And they will not refuse him in any way. This is the time for us to see that the new is here with us. The old is to be looked at and treasured and respected. It is a crisis time. It is one that Norman Lear, who's 98, says is the worst time he's ever had in his life. And I, 10 years younger, can actually back him up on that. It is a difficult time. Let's be closer and closer to the Lord.
Let us build a house where love can dwell and all can safely live. A place where saints and children tell how hearts learn to forgive. Built of hopes and dreams and visions.